It's finally time to wrap this thing up. This took what, 3 months? It's too long. If you guys remember back to part 1, when I painted it, it came out very rough. Now, with me being me, the only thing that I had changed was using the Mr. Color leveling thinner. So I was this close. And here I am holding up my fingers like you guys could see this. I was this close to blaming the bad paint job on that stuff. However, I was having that same problem even on my pre-thin paints that I didn't even use any of the Mr. Color leveling thinner in. So what I eventually found out was that my air compressor, it is sitting on the bench right next to my spray booth. So what's going on there is every time it kicks on, it vibrates the hell out of my work area, and all the dust and overspray, all that falls into my fresh paint job. So what I've been doing in the background here is just sanding all that nasty stuff out. So just like everything else, and I went into a lot more detail with this with the BMW M1 build, but I start off with a low grit and I work my way up to the high grit, and eventually I'm on to the compound polishing, which I am doing right now. It's still not perfect, but it's just gonna sit on a shelf and collect dust after this video, so it's good enough for me. Now the thing with using the polishing compound is it gets stuck in all the little crevices. By far the easiest way to clear all that out is just put some water in your airbrush and spray it out. I was watching a video a few months ago. Very meticulously, this dude went in and scraped all that out with this toothpick, and it just, man, there are easier ways, and this is it. Now, luckily, there's not a lot of trim on this car, just the frame around the side windows. That's it. Now, if you see how I'm doing this, I am essentially just spraying over the edge of the tape and not under it. If you do this and do a very light coat at first, I guarantee you're never going to get any bleed through. So what we're really doing here is that light coat that we spray first. What it does when it dries, it essentially just creates a seal at the edge of that tape. So no matter how heavy you lay on the following coats, no paint will leak through. I promise. Now while I had paints in the airbrush, I went ahead and masked up the windows and painted the trim around the edge of them as well. And just like the door, a very, very light coat around the edge of the tape. Once it dries, I come back with just one single, much heavier coat. And I do mean much heavier. Watch the transition on the frame swatch here. Boom. I was going so heavy with it, I actually ran the airbrush dry. Now, a few minutes ago, I made you guys a promise. Let's see if any of that actually holds true. I'd hate to be a liar. And notice my technique here. Clear parts are very brittle. So what I'm doing is I'm walking my thumb up everywhere where I'm pulling off the tape. Now what I'm doing, or at least what I think I'm doing, is I am just kind of stabilizing it where I think it's going to bend. So it doesn't bend. Because if clear parts bend, they break. So what do you guys think though? Think that technique I just shared with you works? From here on out though, it's just going to be some sub-assembly building. I'm going to start with the doors, move on to the front bonnet, nose piece thing, the rear bonnet, so on, so forth. You'll see. Now those hinges will only go on one way, so don't worry about getting them mixed up from side to side. They will not fit if they go in wrong. These wing window things, they did not fit that well. It's almost like they were too short to fit in that little cubby crevice thing they're supposed to fit in. In fact, in some of the later segments, if you look close enough, you could see the light shining through the bottom of them where there's a noticeable and obvious gap. Now, for a while here, I debated on how I actually wanted to do the lenses. The instructions say to drop the lens down into the front bonnet, then kind of surround it with the headlight bucket. Now, I couldn't do that because I installed these snorkels here because I wanted it all to paint and be the same. So what I eventually did is I kind of just wedged those in there, and the snorkels held them just fine. There's not even glue holding these in, and they're tight. I thought the snorkels are going to break off when I wedged it all together. Now here we ran into kind of a bit of a problem. I'm not sure how Crazy Modeler came up with this. Now if you could look closely, that piece of photo etch, it is very large. It hangs over that little opening quite a bit. See that edge right there? Now from the same photo etch kit, when we install this, it interferes with that piece of mesh. Now luckily, the Enzo kit I bought also included the Tamiya brand photo etch. This piece is much smaller and fits much better. Best of all, it doesn't interfere with that heat shield thingy. And if you could draw your attention to this opening over here, you could see it's installed and not at all causing any problems. So with the Tamiya mesh in, we could finally glue in the heat shield and it all fits in just perfect. Now the rear window, it's got 3 little pegs here and they all fit in a hole, and since there is paint on this and clear coat, it was a rather tight fit. So there is no glue holding this rear window in. It is all a friction fit. Now, if you follow the instructions like you're supposed to do, you'll see where it mentions that there is a metal transfer that's supposed to go on under this piece. Now, their clear red pieces, they're so not really clear that you can't really tell a difference. So I threw them in a parts bin and I'm saving them for later. And also, a toothpick makes installing these pieces so much easier. And for some reason, the side markers and reflectors, even on the front bonnet, they were too small to kind of fit in a little opening there. They really just kind of floated there and didn't actually fit at all. Now since the car is red, these blended in almost too well, so I added some chrome, some Molotow to the back of them, hoping that would make them a bit more reflective, and well, I can't really tell the difference. Again, to me as tinted clear parts, they're not that clear, so you can't really tell. Now this photo etch piece, it was the hardest piece of this whole kit to install. I make it look easy, but what you don't see is off camera, me spending maybe 2-3 hours bending it to fit the contour so it fits in here. Now we have a Ferrari badge, a metal transfer that fits in the center of that. Now to help me locate it, the box stock piece that's supposed to go there, I just kind of taped it in place behind the photo etch and just used that as my guide so I knew where to put that metal transfer. As you can see in the piece that fell out there too, I used a little red Sharpie and put a little line where that piece is supposed to fit in so I could see it better through the photo etch. Now it's small and kind of hard to see, so I'm going to do some different background to give it a contrast so we could see it better. Now I just made a liar of myself and contradicted everything I've ever said. I'm actually using the instructions. What I'm really doing though is I'm using it more as a guide just to help me locate this since the picture is not really to scale. Now as a final sanity check here, I'm just going to give it a quick measure. It is within a half a millimeter of where it needs to be. The human eye will not pick that up. So basically it's perfect. Now when this happened, I had planned to do a guttural Slipknot type scream, but the wife's asleep. So I will just let you know that I was frustrated. Now what I did though is I used my fingers to push the metal transfers down into the mirrors so they would seat and fit better. And all the oils and alcohol residue and diesel fuel, everything on my hands, it kind of stained and it's hard to clean it all off. It is finally time to install this dashboard though, permanently this time. Now we do have to do that though, because the glass gets installed next. As you guys probably could tell from all my builds, the glass is one of the things I like to install last, but it has to go in now. Now this is a box top wiper. It actually looks pretty good. But this is a photo etch piece I spent a good hour bending up and making perfect. Now as good as that photo etch piece is, this is also pretty accurate too. If you look at the reference photos of the real car, now a lot of them from the factory, they came with a really thick, heavy duty winter type wiper blade. So you could go with either and be accurate. But since I spent the time to bend this up, well, I'm going to use it. That was the plan anyway. If you bend up the photo etch wiper blade exactly as the instructions say, it's going to be too long. Now while it does lay out and contour the windshield perfectly, it sticks out about that far. And we can't have that. So I'm going to set this off to the side, wipe the tear off my face of all the time I wasted, and just install this piece. Now it's still accurate and it does look good. Now I built the FXX many years ago, and the gist I got from that kit is just like most kits. I feel like the doors are designed to be displayed open or closed, because they just don't fit that well. Now even though that this will sit on the display shelf when I'm done just to collect dust, I do intend to display it open. But in the meantime, I still got a lot of handling I got to do during assembly, so I'm just going to tape the door shut for now just so they don't get damaged. because really the only thing holding them in place is gravity. Now this piece doesn't really look right to me, but from all the different angles, it's sitting flush and it's where it wants to be. There's just some gaps there. But of course later, with the doors open, that won't matter. Now this is my take on carbon ceramic brakes. I've mentioned it before, but I truly know that Zero Paints makes a very good carbon ceramic paint. However, for $2 whole, you could buy some testers, graphite metallic, and have it look just as good. Now off camera, I painted the calipers black and I applied the Ferrari decals and hit them with a coat of clear. For some reason though, I wasn't paying attention. I installed this on the wrong side. Luckily though, I build a lot of Ferraris, so I got some leftover decals. The problem being though, it is just a very tiny bit bigger than the Tamiya decals. Luckily though, when they're installed, they're so far apart it's impossible to compare the two and realize they're not the same size. Now I was getting rather upset here because this just would not stay in place. And I had realized later, after I turned the camera off, that I forgot to put glue on it. When you're installing these, there's a little bit of wiggle room. Make sure you wiggle so the caliper is as low as possible. I watched a documentary, and Ferrari says that they have their calipers as low as possible for a lower center of gravity. Apparently that helps it turn better. See, and I had always thought that you install them to where you have the shortest possible distance between it and the master cylinder for better braking performance. But what do I know? I'm not an engineer. And sometimes I still catch myself in awe just looking at a 30-year-old Tamiya kit just falling together like that. The rear fascia was kind of fiddly. It wasn't that difficult. You got to kind of slide it in under the exhaust and it just kind of rocks up into place. Now I edited out all the sound, but there is a very audible click when it falls into place. You can't mistake it. Once it's in and it fits. Now don't really worry about this piece being loose right here. Once you install the exhaust tips, it kind of forces the fascia down into the diffuser and it takes all that slop out of there. If you remember during the unboxing, I said the hinge for the rear bonnet is just two Phillips head screws. This is what I was talking about. And I will admit my face just drained the color here at that gap. Then I remembered, oh yeah, we got that spoiler thing here. That fits over it and fills that gap up just fine. Now despite these being matte chrome, they were still very too much chrome for me. So I gave them a nice coat of matte clear and it knocked it all back. They actually look more in line with the cast aluminium look that this car is supposed to have. Now if you look at the tread pattern on these tires, you'll see that they are directional. However, they are not symmetrical. So no matter how you install them, the left side will not match the right side. And I am just mixing and matching, turning these every single which way to try to avoid that, but it's unavoidable. They're not going to match. Now, as I like to do, I always like to set it on a flat surface just to make sure there's no wobble on it and it's actually sitting flat. All four tires are touching the ground, so I'm happy. Now, as you noticed during assembly, I handled this a whole lot. So one of the last things I like to do is install the mirrors because I always knock them off. So they get installed last to keep them safe. And it did slip my mind, we forgot to install the exhaust tips. So we're going to knock those out here real quick. Then it will be done. You might be thinking to yourself, that fancy photo etch kit came with some turned aluminium exhaust tips. Well, let's look at those. Maybe, if I could pick it up. There we go. These things, to me at least, they're way too thin. They're not in scale, and it doesn't look right. To me at least, I didn't like them. So into the parts bin they go in favor of the factory box stock pieces. Now I did run some black paint on the inside of them to kind of make them look more realistic. But that's it, guys. This kit is done. Finally, after 3 long months. Now, if you stayed along for the whole journey, I do appreciate it greatly. I know it took a long time, but thank you, thank you, thank you.